Hello, and welcome back to the Barrens. Ghosts, figures of mystery and debate. From paranormal investigating to campfire stories and tales that date back decades, there are accounts from all over the world. The time from the 1880s to the 1920s is considered the golden age of ghost stories. It seemed to grow in popularity with the gothic fiction genre. But what were some of the first ghost stories ever told? Today, we're going to cover just that. In ancient Babylon, 1500 BCE, there was a tablet discovered that may very well contain the first documented ghost sighting. It is small enough to fit in a person's hand, with half of it missing. It was held at the British Museum in the vaults. It depicts a ghost being led to the afterlife by a lover. It's part of a set of instructions on exorcising a ghost by revealing what it is that causes a ghost to linger. In the case of the tablet, it's loneliness. It was possible that the tablet was held in an exorcist's library or a temple. Irving Finkel, a curator at the London Museum, wrote a book called The First Ghosts, Most Ancient of Legacies. In it, he described that in Mesopotamia, people would use objects like bronze amulets to remove ghosts, and some rituals that even involved a human skull. It is described that ghosts could manifest as sickness in the living, and doctors would recommend they confess their sins before treating with spells. There is also the case of Pliny the Younger. He was a Roman author and statesman in the 1st century AD. He wrote a letter about a ghost to Licinius Sura, who was an influential Roman senator. In the letter, he speaks of a large house in Athens that was reported to be haunted. There would be noises like the hitting of iron against one another or rattling of chains. As the sound grew closer and louder, a ghost would appear. He was an old, emaciated man with a long beard and long hair. The house was left by the tenants for the ghost to have, as they could no longer bear the frightful sounds and appearances. They then put it up for sale with a much lower price than it's worth. Then a philosopher who was visiting Athens, named Athenodorus Canonites, came across the ad for the home. When he heard of the rumors, it piqued his curiosity, encouraging him to buy the house. He then had a couch put out front with oil lamps and writing materials. It was where he would set up for the night. When the chains began to rattle, Athenodorus acted uninterested, choosing to focus on what he was writing. When it became unbearably loud, he finally looked up and saw the ghost. The ghost wagged a finger at him, but rather than pay him heed, Athenodorus simply raised his hand, a gesture meant to tell the ghost to wait, and he continued writing. The ghost began to rattle his chains again and nodded towards him. Athenodorus finally picked up a lamp and followed the ghost into the yard where he disappeared. He then marked that spot. The following day he reported to authorities, and upon inspection, they discovered a skeleton in the marked place. It had been tied with chains and clearly tortured before being killed. The skeleton was removed, given a proper burial, and the house was never haunted again. In 856 AD, the first poltergeist was recorded in Germany. It was a farmhouse, and the family would hear things being thrown around or falling down. It would also supposedly light fires and throw stones at them. In the 1600s, King Henry VIII had a second wife named Anne Boleyn. She was accused of witchcraft, adultery, incest, and treason. This was likely all a lateral move started by Thomas Cromwell, who had a falling out with Anne. She was beheaded on Tower Green on May 19, 1536. It is said that she haunts the tower as well as Hever Castle, which was her childhood home. In North America, the first documented ghost sighting took place on August 9, 1799, in Sullivan, Maine. It was here that a home owned by Abner Blaisdell was reportedly haunted. It was on August 9th that Abner first heard knocking noises. Then, in January, he could hear a female voice tell him that she was the wife of Captain George Butler, and that any who heard her needed to fetch her father, David Hooper. When the father was brought to the home, he also heard the voice, confirming that it was his daughter, Nellie Butler. He later wrote, quote, "She gave such clear and irresistible tokens of her being the spirit of my own daughter, as gave me no less satisfaction than admiration and delight." End quote. After David left, Abner's son Paul was the first to encounter Nellie. He ran home, saying he was chased in the fields by a floating apparition. She then reportedly scolded him later for not talking to her. Nellie's story began gaining traction around February 1800. People would come to see for themselves or even to try and debunk her. It was said, however, that those that tried were met with Nellie's forms of proof. A female witness had this to report, quote, "At first the apparition was a mere mass of light. Then it grew into a personal form, about as tall as myself, and the glow from the apparition had a constant, tremulous motion. At last the personal form became shapeless, expanded every way, and then vanished in a moment." End quote. Supposedly after this, Nellie disappeared for 4 months before revealing herself again to 20 witnesses. Reverend Abraham Cummings of Harvard University had visited as well. He thought the whole thing was false until he saw Nellie for himself. He said that she first appeared as a white cloud of light that rose up from the ground and away from him. Then it was suddenly in front of him and turned into a child-sized figure that then morphed into an adult apparition. Rays of light also came from her head. The Reverend wrote a pamphlet after this experience called "Immortality Proved by the Testimony of Sense." It was about his encounter and attempting to align it with biblical scripture. One of the few remaining copies is said to be held in Brown University. There is a source that states that Nellie told her husband to marry Abner's daughter Lydia, of which he did. She apparently told him to be kind to his wife and even predicted her premature death, which took place just after they birthed their first child. For some unknown reason, Nellie only showed herself once more after her encounter with the Reverend. It was said by her husband, George Butler, however, that she appeared to him one night while he was in bed, scolding him for remarrying when he had promised her on her deathbed that he would not. These are just a few of the cases that I found through my research. I'm going to try and have one more video out before Halloween or on Halloween, so I'm hoping that I'm able to do that. But that wraps up this video. As always, if there's any questions or comments, please leave them down below. And until next time, stay safe, stay healthy, and thank you for joining me in the Barrens.